Welcome to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast, brought to you by LexisNexis Risk Solutions. Established in 2016, the Fintech Times is a global multimedia news outlet centered around the world's first leading fintech newspaper. We report on the latest and brightest ideas from the fintech world. Follow the conversation using hashtag TFD News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times. Hello, and welcome back to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast. Unfortunately, it is a little bit of a sad one today, as Tyler, it's your last episode with us.
Yes. Thank you, Polly. I'm reaching my expiration date, but really happy to be here with you guys this week, recording the last episode that I'll be featured in. Never be the same again, but yeah, very happy to be here. How are you, Francis? How are you, Polly?
It actually won't be the same again, and I'm devastated. Mate, we're gonna miss you.
Absolutely, and it's going to be very different without you. You know, I feel like we've had so much fun, haven't we, the three of us, making this podcast, so...
We have to go back to episode 50 when the three of us started. I think it was somewhere around there.
Yeah, it was somewhere, yeah, of course.
Us not knowing how to speak in terms of a podcast, it just being an awkward reading off of a script.
Anyway, crying aside, we're here today to talk about fintech, obviously. So what are you guys going to be talking about today? Francis, what's your article?
So my article this week is, a company I think we've all probably heard of, is Apple, and its release of its Apple saving account.
Fabulous. And Tyler, what article are you going to be bringing today?
I was so close to talking about that Apple article, Francis, and when I found out that you were doing it, I was quite relieved. But I'm actually going to be bringing to the table a story about Paylink Solutions and how they are making numeracy accessible to the masses. So yeah, what about you, Polly?
Fantastic. So I am going to be talking about the post office and how it remains a key hub for banking. All very exciting. But I mean, Tyler, it's your last episode, so I'm going to let you decide who gets to go first, whether that's yourself or someone else. You can pick.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. I think Francis, you know what? I think you should go first, man. I think I'm really excited to hear that Apple story. So why don't you take it away?
Just for you, Tyler, just for you. Absolutely. So, yeah, as I mentioned, the article that I'm going to be talking about is Apple breaking into the fintech world with its saving account for Apple cardholders. In October 2022, the tech giant Apple announced it was partnering with Goldman Sachs to launch Apple savings accounts for Apple cardholders. 6 months later, Apple has actually launched the product with a 4.15% interest rate, which, according to Apple, is incredibly good. So there you go. But the way this works is that Apple cardholders can now enhance their daily cash, which is a cashback feature for the cardholders when making purchases online. When they use their Apple card, they get cash back on all their purchases, and the amount that they get put in directly into their Apple savings account varies depending on how they make the payment. So by default, all purchases will grant the buyer 1% in cash rewards. They will get 2% in cash rewards if they make them payments, using Apple Pay. And then with select merchants, they will be able to get up to 3% cash back. And the daily cash the destination can be changed at any time, and there's no limit on how much daily cash users can earn. So why is this such a big deal for Apple, and why is it such a big deal in general, really, for the fintech market? Well, Apple's done the complete right thing here because it shows they're aware of what their consumers want. When I was doing this article, I did a bit of research around, consumer desires and their best way to receive rewards, if you will. And while you see points such as like airline flight points or air miles, those type of things, where the more you spend, the more points you build up, and then eventually you can redeem a big reward. Whilst those are good, generally speaking, consumers prefer instant gratification, which comes from instant cashback. If you make a purchase and you see X amount go back into your account, you think, great, I didn't spend as much as I actually thought I was going to. Whereas if you're saving up points, sure, eventually you might get something completely free, but in the lead up to that, it doesn't feel as good. So that in and of itself shows that Apple is aware of, what consumers want, and, it's a way to ensure consumer loyalty and ensure consumers keep coming back, which at the end of the day is what every business wants. Another reason why this is so significant is because it comes off the heels of, of Elon Musk making his Twitter announcements saying that he wants Twitter to be the everything app, right? And I think this is something that we're starting to see sort of all tech companies start to adopt, especially because if we look at Amazon, for example, Amazon has also launched a Prime discount credit card. it did so in 2017. And this is like a trend that we're starting to see now, where organizations that previously weren't financial whatsoever are now creating these offerings. And there's an argument to be had that it's a necessity now. It's not going to be a thing of one company deciding to do it or not. It's going to become almost like every organization now offering a cardless solution, where previously some local businesses could probably say we want cash only. Now in the modern day, you have to have a digital solution just because of how cashless the society and economy has become. And I'm starting to think that tech giants like Apple are following suit, and this is something that we're going to continue to see across the board, really. So in that regard, I think Apple is a massive innovator in the space, and I think it will be interesting to see how they further improve their offering, and which other, if their competitors are going to follow suit, or if it's just going to be maybe they're the only ones that are going to stand out. So it'll be an interesting space to wait and see. So Tyler, you said you were excited to talk about this article. What are your thoughts?
I think this is a really exciting article and a really good announcement by Apple. I think the elements of the savings account make it a very competitive offer from Apple, especially with such a high interest rate. I loved what you said, Francis, about sort of these companies like wearing many hats in a sense. We saw it a lot with like Amazon. We've seen it slightly with PayPal as well. And now to like see what Apple are doing to advance payments, I think is really, really cool. We saw them venture into the buy now, pay later space, of course, last month. And they've also worked recently with Paymentology to launch Apple Pay in Latam, which is really exciting as an emerging market. And I think just watching companies really understand and react to the market, to the financial market, is quite interesting to see. And I think it's sort of creating a superpower race in sort of the industry, which I think is going to be really fascinating to be reporting on. So yeah,
just on that point as well that you were sort of saying about being aware and seeing this competitive space, I think what's interesting is we heard from industry experts, and Andy Nelson, head of banking and financial markets at NTT Data, said that banks need to be, traditional banks that is, need to be aware of these offerings, because like you mentioned, it's going to create an incredibly competitive space, and it's almost like neobanks 2.0 or challenger banks 2.0. It's now not just a new financial offering that's solely digital and is like a new challenger. It's an all new type of challenger, which is like we said, it's this new everything app. So yeah, Polly, sorry, I had to jump in there with that. What are your thoughts on the article?
It's okay, because I agree with you. This kind of everything app vibe just seems to be so popular at the moment. Like you both have been saying, I feel like everyone saw how great WeChat was doing in Asia. Obviously, WeChat being like the big super app where you can do freaking everything on it. And everyone are just trying to emulate that success, which like you can see why, especially for these big companies and stuff like that. They're always going to want to find new ways to stay interesting and stay relevant and to ultimately make money. So I think it's just really interesting to come from Apple, because I know they also recently announced they were going to be moving into the buy now pay later space as well. That wasn't too long ago. So it feels like they're really pushing to get into this finance space and this consumer finance space. And it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, like whether they've almost come at it too late, maybe. But then saying that, obviously, we've got a lot of these big companies sort of in the works. Like I know Twitter is very keen on being an everything app as well, Amazon. So maybe it's just the race between these big companies, and actually it's the perfect time for Apple to be moving into this space. I mean, personally, I use Apple Pay for literally everything, like literally everything. So to get like 3% cash back on that, I'd be down. I'd be so down for that. So I think it's a really interesting offering, and a really one that everyone I think is gonna love, especially at the moment. What with the cost of living crisis and stuff like that, everyone's gonna love to get a bit more out of their money when it comes to the savings and things like that. So yeah, I mean it's one again to see how it plays out, and just kind of watch this big super app race. I guess everyone wants to be a super app, and I think it's really interesting to see who's gonna do it, who's gonna crack it first.
I think what's most interesting about it is I think Twitter has created the hype for super apps. With Elon Musk, he's constantly talking about it.
I think Twitter has created the hype. I completely agree with you, but they're not necessarily delivering on that hype. So other people are swooping in and capitalizing on that, which
That's exactly what my point was going to be, is that I think Apple has seen sort of how excited people are for it, and they've gone, cool, I'll have some of that. And I mean, you mentioned WeChat, but I mean, you can also look at PixPay in Brazil as another great example. That's on WhatsApp. WhatsApp is always has been this communications app, and now they're introducing, well, they have had, P2P payments for a long time, but now they're also doing B2C payments on there. Customers are now going to be able to make purchases from small businesses through WhatsApp, which is, it just really is this idea of everything you need is going to be on this app. And yeah, I think it's a very exciting space to keep an eye on.
I think that was a really, really interesting intro, Francis, and well done to Apple Pay for their new savings account. Well, as I mentioned in the intro, this is a new article which is really, really exciting on Paylink Solutions. And basically what they've done, they have this digital income and expenditure platform called Embark. It's one of the most popular platforms of its kind in the marketplace. And Paylink Solutions have studied the market and studied how their services are delivered, and has discovered, in fact, that there's a huge sort of gap in people's understanding of numbers, and not in like a PhD data scientist kind of way, but in more just practical ability and a basic ability to handle and interpret numbers, which is fair enough. To be honest, this is sort of ironic, but I was never the best in my maths class at school, and yet here we are working in this industry. I think that it's really key to numeracy skills are really key to unlocking financial inclusion in all its forms, and especially during the cost of living crisis. And so, to ensure that this platform, Embark, was as user friendly as possible, it brought in the social enterprise plane numbers. It brought in one of its practitioners to basically review its platform and make any improvements if needs be. This is actually a really timely plan because the UK government has just announced that they want to increase the maths ability of citizens in England. And also in light of the fact that 49% of the working adult population have the numeracy skills of primary school age children. So I think it's a really, really good initiative. Above all, this review of the plain numbers practitioner is to ensure that the service remains as user friendly as possible. And I think, above all, that in times of the cost of living crisis, when the need to really juggle numbers is at its highest, I think that making this platform user friendly and number friendly above everything else is really, really key. And I just wanted to get your feedback on that, guys, really. So yeah, Francis, what do you think of this initiative and sort of collaborating with other enterprises to ensure that your service is up to scratch?
I mean, when you sent this article, I was pretty happy to be talking about it. And I mean, just before I dive into that, I just want to quickly say I'm exactly the same as you, Tyler, in the sense that I was terrible with numbers, which is, I think, why I became a journalist and not someone who's actually, an innovator in fintech who knows numbers.
Yeah.
But in regards to the article, I think it is a great initiative because it's hard to really think about, I think, how many people really do struggle with this sort of stuff. And when you see that, it really does make you realize that there is this untapped market, essentially. Just not because of, I guess, ignorance, really. It's just there's an inability to understand what is being offered. And I think if you're looking at it from a business perspective, this is a huge opportunity to really, get people involved and create this market loyalty. I mean, if we're talking about loyalty like we were in Apple, if you've got five payment services that are all offering the same thing, and only one of them is trying to actually make life easy for you to actually understand what's happening, to understand, how you can save money in such a crisis. I think is you're going to want to stick with that one for a long time, because there's that sort of, I don't want to say it's like a personalized, tailored thing, because it's not, but to a certain degree it is almost, I guess, and I think that really does do a lot for a company and for a consumer. So I think in that regard, it's really a win-win. And I think when you realize, I mean, I remember once a long, long time ago, I was in Brazil, and I was in the supermarket with my family, and somebody came up to my parents and I and was like, "Sorry, can you tell me what the power on this light bulb is?" And it's because he was illiterate, and he couldn't read numbers. He didn't know what the better voltage was for his lights. And I think when you look at that, and I just think to myself, well, if there was a company that said, we're going to take the time to try and help you, just imagine that guy, he's always going to go back to that company. So if you look at it from that perspective, I think that it's a surefire way to ensure more consumers, and like I said, it's a win-win for both.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's difficult to be too user friendly, especially when considering here in England that the numeracy skills of those were measured against primary school children. So I think that sort of level of financial inclusion really does depend on your relationship with numbers, I guess. And I think that Paylink Solutions, especially in being a digital income and expenditure platform, is really going to help people streamline basically their outgoings and incomings during a really difficult economic time too, right? Polly, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I, like you guys, was never particularly good at maths. So I'm a journalist, like you, Francis. I stopped doing maths when I was 15 because I did my GCSE a year early and was like, "Yep, that's enough maths for me." So there you go. And I just agree with everything that you guys have said. I think it's so important for financial inclusion and for everything that we talk about so often on this podcast, right? It's so important to just make sure that everything that you are saying as a company, no matter what that company is, obviously in here we're talking about payments and financials, but to make it so that everyone can understand what it is that you're trying to say and what it is that they are trying to achieve with your products or services. And so to make communications engaging, effective, and just understandable to people, regardless of their numeracy level, is just really important, I think, in fintech and in finance. And I think, right now is the most important time even to be looking into something like this. So it's really great to see that it's being done. I think one of the things that really took me was in the piece it said how 49% of the working adult population are believed to have numeracy skills of primary school age children. That's a lot. Like, that is a lot, and that really quite shocked me. And I think, yeah, it's just things like this are so important, and I really, really truly think that it can only be a good thing. And I want a lot of other fintechs to have a look and sort of follow suit, really, because at the end of the day, it's all about doing what's best for your consumers, right? Your consumers lead your business, and if your consumers don't get it, then there's no point. So no, I'm a very big fan of this for sure.
Yeah, I think you've all both raised some really, really fantastic points, especially when we've focused in the last month on diversity and inclusion in our work. I think this is just sort of a really nice way to end it all. I think, will other companies follow and heed to the warning of the government and of findings like these? I really, really do hope so, because although innovation can be very complex, it also at the same time needs to be incredibly simple for those making their first steps with it. So I think, it's difficult to keep it over like too simple, I think the Paylink Solutions have done really well to bring this sort of third-party practitioner in. Francis, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly sort of, perhaps I already said it, but I just wanted to reiterate, is that if for all your life you haven't had access to something and then suddenly you get access to it, the loyalty that's going to be there is going to be much, much, much higher than I think, if it was for someone who has had access and has understood all this stuff, because it's almost like their only option. So I think for organizations to really jump on this now is a surefire win. And yeah, I think it's a great initiative by Paylink.
Fantastic. Well, Polly, should we move on to your article? Third and final article of the podcast?
Absolutely. So let's talk about the post office. Love the post office. So basically, the post office has kind of made itself to be a really key hub for banking and other financial things at the moment. And the Financial Conduct Authority has recently outlined a new set of measures designed to reduce the risk of money laundering via the post office. So while the post office has become quite a key source for a lot of people, obviously with bank branches being closed and it's quite difficult to get to a bank branch nowadays, the post office has kind of filled that gap for a lot of people, because you do find there are more post offices than there are banks at the moment. And especially when you think about the post offices that are like inside co-ops and things like that, inside shops, they're just everywhere, and you could do a lot of different banking and financial things there, which just makes everything so much more accessible and so much more easy for people to access. So they're a really fantastic hub. However, apparently, according to the National Economic Crime Centre, hundreds of millions of pounds are laundered annually using cash deposits at the post office. And I thought, what a brilliant article to talk about today, because isn't that just wild? I love it. I mean, I don't love it. Money laundering's bad. But it's just one of those like an insane things that I think is wow. Okay, so a lot of measures are being set out for banks by the FCA, including moving towards card-based transactions and away from like paying in slips, and educating staff around suspicious behavior and things like that. And that's also being obviously applied to the post office. And I just think it's a very interesting thing, and I think it's going to be quite a key balancing act here for both the Financial Conduct Authority and the post office to reduce the risk of money laundering and other financial crime, while also keeping the cash banking services available to consumers, because most people use the post office to pay in money. That's just one of the key things that you can do at the post office. And a lot of people use that. But obviously, if people are paying in money to money launder, that's an issue. So, how do you stop people paying in money, and how do you stop money laundering? It's a very sort of tightrope. Yeah, that's right. It's a very balancing act to follow. So I just thought it would be an interesting one to talk about today. Both, I thought this would be a great one. Let's talk about like financial crime in this sense of the cash perspective, but also I just really want to talk about the post office and how it's really filled that gap that bank branches have left, and I think that's really quite fantastic, to be honest with you. But I mean, like, Francis, what do you think about this whole thing?
I don't know if this is just me, but when I hear about sort of like money laundering, especially with the post office, all I can really think of is like Line of Duty and like TV shows like that, where you get all these financial crime organizations, or what are they called? Organized crime, and they just got all this money laundering stuff. I don't know. I think it's quite funny. But if we're looking at sort of a lifeline that post offices have created for people, I think, yeah, you really do have to give them credit, and sort of like you said, they are the cash outlet, if you will. And I think when you look at it in that regard, it just highlights the importance for education and sort of training for its staff members to sort of identify what is, suspicious and what should be identified, and, I guess like start out to just keep an eye on. I think that is really important. And what I found interesting was that they're reducing the cash deposit limits below the existing £20,000. And I think that is, I guess, it's a good thing, right? Because you don't really feel, or at least maybe this is just naivety, but I don't feel like many people are really paying in huge cash slips or pay slips anymore, like physical things anymore. I think most things are done digitally. So in that regard, I think just having more training and sort of having more awareness, I suppose, to financial crime. I mean, it's almost like Tyler was saying in terms of, accessibility. You just can't ever have enough of it. There's not like a limit where it gets to training and you're like, all right, let's just call it there. No, like the more you have, the better. So yeah, I suppose in that regard, I think it's really good. But like you said, that stat of how much money is really laundered, if you're talking about financial crime, is crazy. It's nuts.
Yeah, I completely agree, and especially on the accessibility front. And I think it's always going to be one of those arguments when you talk about cash, because I think you do think that cash is probably one of the safest ways to pay because it can't be hacked. But then you've got other things that can come up with cash, like this whole money laundering thing. But Tyler, what do you think?
I think that the post office is like a dark horse in the race of digital banking services and or banking services more in general. I think first of all, I went to on like this crazy road trip about 5 years ago, and it was in the US. And to get the currency card, I actually went to the post office and used their services, which I really recommend. But I think in terms of like the FCA recognizing the post office's role in indirect role in money laundering, I think is really good, and introducing all these measures that Francis discussed. I think we'll do a lot. If you know, the post office is going to be at the center of a lot of indirect crime. You know, like an unwitting sort of assistant in it. If you look at what might go through the post, for example, I'm sure people mail narcotics or dangerous weapons, or you know, whatever they're doing that's related to laundering. So I think the FCA introducing these measures are really, really cool. I think it'll be interesting to see maybe a little bit away from the conversation of fraud, what the post office will do to better place themselves within sort of the first top choices for service providers in the future. But I think above all, they've become like a real key member of the provider ecosystem. And I'm here for the post office. I love it.
Thank you. I'm glad someone else is as enthusiastic about the post office as I am, because I think it's just brilliant, and it's definitely a way for people to still access the services they need while banks can, continue to scale down with their branches and things like that. So, but no, thank you guys. That was a really interesting discussion this week. If you want to hear any more about any of the articles that we've spoken about today, head on over to fintechtimes.com, where you can find plenty of news and insights all about the fintech world. And then let's do what I learned this week. So each week we learn so much new information as the editorial team, so much new news and insights across our desks all the time. So we're learning things every single day, and we thought it'd be fun to share that with our listeners. So, Francis, what have you learned this week?
So this week, I learnt that Independent Age, the National Older People's Charity, has delivered an overdue invoice for over £1.1 billion to the government, highlighting the massive amount of pension credit that's still going unclaimed.
Crikey. Okay, well, Tyler, what have you learned this week?
This week, I learned that the fintech, the international payment technology company, People, is working in Kenya with a tuk-tuk community called the Tuk-Tuk Operators Network to revolutionize their payments and digitalize their operations. And it was just shocked me that there were over 1.6 million operators across Kenya for these tuk-tuks, and they really reminded me of what we have here in London with what I'm not sure what they're called, the like buggies, with all the colorful lights and stuff. So I thought that was really cool, and I thought it was cool to sort of tap into a really niche demographic of the market in
Have
Kenya.
you ever been in a tuk-tuk, like an actual tuk-tuk in like
No,
Kenya or
no,
India, somewhere
which
like
is
that?
why it was so fascinating to me.
It is literally, you are fighting for your life. They are fearless. You are hanging on like there's no tomorrow. It's terrifying, but efficient. They get you there quickly. Anyway, what I learned this week was British people lose almost £900 a year due to difficulties with talking about money because they find it awkward to ask for money back, which I just found quite funny because I am also ruthless about getting money back. So it's a shame. People need to just be more assertive. But anyway, thank you guys once again for joining me on this podcast. It has been fabulous to talk about fintech with you. Tyler, very, very sad that it's come to an end, but wish you all the best, and hopefully we can have you back maybe as a guest.
Yeah, that would be really cool, guys. Insert memory montage here. But yeah, it's been really fantastic. I've been so grateful to work with you guys over the past 2 years. And thank you to everybody who takes the time to listen to this podcast and read the articles. It's been fantastic. But until then, thank you very much, guys. And I shall not see you next week, but I'll definitely be listening next week.
Thanks, guys. Catch you on the next one.
It's been wicked, guys. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thanks for listening to the Fintech Times News and Views podcast, brought to you by LexisNexis Risk Solutions. Don't miss next week's episode and continue the conversation using hashtag TFT News and Views and follow us at the Fintech Times.